We hear the word dogma used to describe Nazis and Islamic fundamentalists. We hear the word dogma used to describe Klansmen and deranged televangelists. We begin to understand that dogma is only dogma when the bad guys do it. For anyone who doesn't know, dogma is unquestioning, uncritical belief. At its core, it is irrational, unjustified, and baseless belief. It is, in 2 words, unquestioning support. It is belief with the absence of introspection, rationality, and critical thinking. We view dogma as a thing that the bad guys do. We kind of know the definition, but we only really think about it when we want to insult the bad guys. We never ask ourselves if we could be the dogmatists, and the fact that we never ask that question is evidence that we are in fact dogmatists. After all, what is dogmatism if not unquestioning belief and a complete lack of introspection? We never ask ourselves why cruelty is wrong. We never ask ourselves why exploitation is wrong. We never ask ourselves why racism is wrong. We never ask ourselves why genocide is wrong. We never ask ourselves why oppression is wrong. We never ask ourselves why hurting innocent people is wrong. We never ask these questions because we take them to be self-evident. We take them to be self-evident in the exact same way a dogmatic Islamic extremist takes the righteousness of the Islamic State to be self-evident. In the exact same way the average Nazi takes anti-Semitism to be self-evident. In the exact same way that every slaver and oppressor history has ever seen has taken the cruelty and barbarism they commit to be self-evidently permissible. And some will say that our views are different to theirs, and that our ones are the truly self-evident ones. Well, guess what? They all think the same thing. We are also intellectually restricted dogmatists, just as our enemies are. We are also unquestioning followers. We are also mindless reflections of the assumptions of our societies. But we don't have to be. This is not to say we believe the wrong things. It is just to say we don't really believe them for any reason. Perhaps what we believe is right, but how will we ever know when we are unthinking dogmatists who don't even ask ourselves why we believe what we believe? We wonder why our society is incoherent and irrational. What should we expect when it is based on assumptions, irrationality, and a complete lack of introspection? We should not be surprised when our society is irrational. We should be surprised when it is rational. Irrationality goes to the very core of our society. Rationality most certainly does not. Most people are dogmatists, just as Islamic militants, Nazis, Christian fundamentalists, and slavers are. We all have this in common, or at least most of us do. Perhaps we are not like Islamic militants, Nazis, and slavers, but how can we know we are so different to these groups when we don't even examine and question the foundations of our worldviews? Like all these people in the past, we just inherit an amalgamation of ideas and then assume they are some objective commentary on the world. There are things that make us different to these groups, but in that we are dogmatists, we are one and the same, and that will never change until we take it upon ourselves to address confronting questions like those I provided earlier. Ask yourself, why should we care? Discover the foundation of your reason. Dogmatism is reactionary in that it restricts intellectual progress. It gets in the way of us creating better ideas and understandings. It gets in the way of us knowing if our ideas and understandings are even justified. We need introspection, rationality, critical thinking, and a lot of it. Dogma needs to die, and not just in the people we hate, but in us as well. It is highly likely that you are a dogmatist, but you don't have to be. Saying you are a dogmatist does not mean all of your positions are wrong. It just means you don't know why you believe them. They could be largely the right positions, but how will you ever know until you understand the foundational reasoning behind them? We must engage in critical thinking, introspection, and careful rational consideration. We can remove that intellectual flaw that currently puts you in the same camp as so many of the people you despise. We can cure ourselves of dogma. Unquestioning support is everywhere, when it should be nowhere. Why should unquestioning support be nowhere? Because it limits and restricts the intellectual progress that is in our interest. Dogma needs to die, and the first step is simply asking why. Ask yourself why you should care. Get to the foundational reasoning of all of your positions. Whenever an assumption arises, whenever dogmatism arises, let it be crushed by that three-letter word. Why? Alternatively, ask, why should I care? If asking questions has ever done any damage, that damage is nothing compared to the damage done by the absence of questions.